Vic Valleau brings a wealth of talent to the show. He's been a practicing attorney for 50 years. He's an accomplished actor and also a professional speaker. So without much ado, let's start the interview. Now, Vic, I know you were interested in politics at an early age. In fact, you were president of your high school class. Well, at some point, I guess you decided to become an attorney. Can you tell us what inspired you to actually change careers and enter the legal profession?
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the introduction. I became an attorney because I graduated from law school. That's the basic requirement. And my interest didn't really develop, I don't think, until I was at Cornell, involved with a demonstration. As I mentioned, when we were walking out of the Student Center, the National Guard had been called in to calm the students and prevent destruction on the campus, or whatever the motivation was, 1968. And there's two National Guardsmen who are sitting in a machine gun nest, aiming a machine gun at me as I'm walking out of the Student Center, carrying a cup of coffee at 7:30 in the morning. And I realized this is a big deal. You know, the law is not just something that you can casually walk in and out of. It actually impacts people's lives in a very fundamental way. So that probably was a springboard for me more than anything. But I was president of my 8th grade class, and what I found out was it was an incredible headache. I could barely manage it. I hated it. I was very unhappy. And when I graduated from Cornell, I tried to be a speechwriter for Edmund Muskie. And so I went to Washington, D.C., and I interviewed in the Senate office building. And it's very impressive, I think, as we all know, as a result of January 6th, because we had a personal, intimate tour of the Capitol building. So basically, that was it. I developed an interest as a result of experiences.
Okay, one of the great talents you bring to the show is you actually were a constitutional professor.
I was a professor of constitutional law after I graduated from Cornell. And it was a fascinating experience because I really liked teaching. I also enjoyed bringing the dramatic elements of the law into everyday situations. And my students were just so galvanized by what it was like to actually be in that situation, to be a lawyer and arguing a case. So yeah, I did. I wrote a couple articles. I wrote an article on the use of executive power and executive orders. And we're now, by the way, we're looking at that because the new president has issued 18 executive orders in one day. And all that amounts to is a signature on a piece of paper, but it changes a lot of things in the government. So, and recently a Supreme Court decision came down that said the emollients clause is not in effect after a president leaves office, which I think is a total mistake. I think the court is dead wrong on that subject, but it kind of goes to show how polarized our political system is today.
Okay, let's move on to your litigation career. I know going to events with you're always pointing out a club or a restaurant. Hey, I represented so and so.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that person there will give us a free meal because I was in court with him and won.
Right.
And on and on.
Well, I've done a lot of litigating.
I actually thought to myself, Vic Valleau must have represented half the people in Los Angeles. But let's get just into a couple cases. What did you find the most satisfying case of all your must be almost 100 cases?
Well, I represented a Catholic nun who was accused of selling pornography. And she and her husband bought a bookstore in Laguna Beach that had comic books in it, and they were called underground comics. And at the time, apparently the Orange County District Attorney's Office was on some kind of a political jag, because they decided to arrest this Catholic nun and her husband for selling pornography. I disagreed totally, so I took the case as a pro bono. And the American Civil Liberties Union had a similar attitude, so they associated another attorney in on the case. And when we were in front of the judge, we were arguing the social merits of the literature, the comic books, because the standard in a pornography case is whether or not it appeals primarily to their prurient interests. Now, prurient is not a word that people use generally speaking, but what it means is it's designed almost exclusively to titillate, and it has no redeeming social value other than that. So we came to court. I walked into the argument with a stack of Playboys and Penthouses and every other thing I could find on any local newsstand, and laid them out and explained to the court that not one of these publications has been barred because of prurient interest. And the comic book that we have is innocent compared to what you were looking at here. And we won that case.
Wow, that's great. Moving on, what would you consider like your most dramatic case, or one where there was more theatrics than legal filings? I would imagine, a case where you ever.
Well, that one took the cake. That was probably the most dramatic case I'd ever been involved in, because the newspapers were there and there was TV coverage, a lot of media coverage. Usually lawyers don't get that, and probably for good reason, because you're only representing one person in one situation. But
how about,
go ahead.
How about a case that you'd like to take back and do a different way, or you have regrets over, maybe what you learned from a case?
I used to write a lot of statutes for the Attorney General in Seattle, Washington. And what I learned is that you can't, or rather you can be aggressive when you're writing laws, because it's more than a dry academic subject. And what I was saying in the statutes was workmen, many workmen had lung cancer from pneumoconiosis or asbestosis because they were ship workers. And so I wrote the law and kind of conforming to what the other states were doing in that arena. But now, in looking back, I wish I was more aggressive in how I approached to help the workmen and the injured people. Well,
that's very true in the era of Trump. Anything goes legally, so to speak.
Yes. I have a two-part definition of that, and that is, what is the law of impeachment? And the answer is, there is no law of impeachment. The law of impeachment is what the United States Senate says it is. There is no final appeal on that subject. So if 51% of the senators say black is white, black is white. Now, let me take that in a more constructive context. 51% of the senators said that there was a legal challenge to the impeachment. In other words, the impeachment was legal. That means 49% of them didn't agree, but the rule of impeachment is that the Senate is the final authority. It's like the Supreme Court's the final authority on certain cases. Once they've spoken, that's the end of the subject.
Okay, let's get to your managerial experience. part of the show will be probably managing a staff of 4 or 5 researchers, especially if it's a week show. You obviously won't be able to do the research yourself.
Mhm, mhm.
And so you've actually had a staff of 8 lawyers and paralegals.
Yeah,
Uh,
well,
how did
yes,
you
when I was
find that experience?
uh, challenging. It's challenging to manage a staff because you really are subject to what they can produce. In other words, their result is your result. Yes, I did. I had several employees, and I found out in more ways than one that it's something that you need to manage carefully because sometimes people will give you results that aren't 100% accurate, and your reputation is on the line. So you really need to push and pull and motivate your staff to be as accurate as they can be.
Okay, let's move on to a subject that's probably less stressful, or is it acting?
Well,
you are you you have a lifetime membership as a SAG actor, and living in LA, I know you got interested in acting. Uh, so
yes.
how is that? That actually makes you a perfect candidate for the show, also because you've been in front of the camera. So
Well,
what's
I've been acting since the 70s. I was in a film with Robert De Niro, and then more recently, I was in a film with let me see, The Truman Show. I actually played the character that ultimately was played by Ed Harris, but that was God. Trailer Las Vegas and ended up with $10 million to finance the project. So, and I was in a film called Nixon, and I was in a film called New York, New York, and I auditioned for a film called Air Force One, which everyone at this point is familiar with. It's the plane that the president flies on. It was a story about the Russians in a mid-air transfer hijacking Air Force One. And my line was, as I played a Russian, and my line was, the first thing we do, we kill the American. It took me days to figure out the Russian accent, but that's the best I have. You can see why I didn't get it, right?
well, I think you should have gotten it.
Thank you.
To get you off the hot seat with an easy question, what other interests do you have besides law, public speaking, and acting? And
well, I was thinking of taking up karaoke. I like screenwriting. I like writing, and things like that.
your opinion on a very important topic. What do you think of the modern California woman?
Well, what they say is you need consent, and preferably it's better if it's in writing. So that's my approach.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Vic.
You're welcome.